Before anything else, I need to make you a sincere request. Don't leave this video before you reach the end. I know that might sound like an exaggeration, but what I'm going to tell you here today has the power to completely change the way you see money, and more importantly, the way money sees you. You're going to hear the story of a man named Diego, a man who spent years of his life doing exactly what everyone else does, chasing money with every ounce of strength he had, working harder, pushing harder, searching for more, and still feeling like it was never enough. Until one day, a single sentence changed everything in his mind. A simple sentence that made him question every financial decision he'd ever made, and that opened the door to a transformation he never imagined was possible. Throughout this video, you're going to discover why chasing money actually pushes it away from you. You're going to understand the identity shift that separates those who live in scarcity from those who live in abundance. And you're going to learn how to become someone who naturally attracts financial opportunities instead of endlessly chasing after them. But I'm warning you, some of the things I'm going to say here might make you uncomfortable. They might force you to see truths about yourself that you'd rather not face. They might hold a mirror up in front of you and reveal patterns that are sabotaging your financial life without you even realizing it. But it's precisely in that discomfort that change lives. So stick with me until the end, because I guarantee you, when this video's over, you'll never look at money the same way again. I want to start by asking you a question that seems simple but carries far more weight than you might imagine. Do you feel like you're always chasing money and can never quite catch it? Think about it with me for a moment. You wake up early, you go to work, you give it your all, you do what needs to be done. You look for ways to earn more, you try to save, you try to get organized, and yet at the end of the month, the feeling is always the same. The feeling that it wasn't enough, that it didn't work out, that no matter how hard you tried, the result didn't match the size of the effort. And then you ask yourself, what's wrong with me? Why do other people seem to get so easily what I can't get even when I'm giving my absolute best? If that feeling is familiar to you, I need you to know two things. The first is that you're not alone. Millions of people around the world are living this exact same reality and feeling this exact same frustration. The second, and this is the most important one, is that the problem isn't how hard you're trying. The problem is the direction of your effort. And when I say direction, I'm not talking about financial strategy or investments or side income. I'm talking about something much deeper, much more fundamental, something that's happening inside you, in the way you think, in the way you see yourself, in the way you relate to money on a level you've probably never stopped to analyze. And that's exactly what I'm going to talk to you about today. But first, I need to tell you Diego's story, because it's through his journey that everything is going to click in your head, like pieces of a puzzle you've been trying to put together for years without being able to make them fit. Diego was a man like so many others, hardworking, dedicated, responsible, the kind of person who doesn't sit around waiting for things to happen. He went after them. From a very young age, Diego learned that the path to a better life was hard work. He heard it from his parents, his grandparents, his aunts and uncles, his teachers. Work hard and the reward will come. And he believed it with every fiber of his soul. He turned that belief into the engine of his life. He woke up before everyone else, got to work before any of his co-workers, stayed late when it was necessary, took on extra tasks without complaining, put in overtime without asking for additional pay, all because he believed that this effort, this relentless dedication, would be recognized and rewarded by the universe, by life, by someone. And for a long time, he kept up that pace, without questioning, without doubting, without stopping to think about whether that path was actually leading where he wanted to go. He just ran. He chased money with the same intensity as someone chasing a bus that's about to pull away, with desperation, with urgency, with that feeling that if he stopped for even 1 second, he'd miss his chance. And I need to ask you something here, because this reflection is essential for what comes next. Do you identify with Diego? Are you also living in this constant race, this never-ending pursuit of more money, more income, more opportunities, feeling like it's never enough, like you can never catch up, Like no matter how fast you run, the money is always one step ahead. Because if your answer is yes, what I'm about to tell you could change the entire direction of your life. Here's the thing. Despite all that effort, despite all that dedication, Diego's financial life wasn't improving. He worked more, but the money didn't increase at the same rate. He looked for new sources of income, but every time extra income showed up, an extra expense appeared right alongside it, as if there were some invisible law keeping him in the same place. He tried to save, but something always came along that ate up his savings. The car broke down, a health problem popped up, an unexpected bill arrived, a financial obligation he hadn't anticipated materialized out of thin air. It was like he was on a treadmill, running with everything he had, sweating, draining himself, but going nowhere. And the most disturbing part wasn't the lack of progress itself. The most disturbing part was looking around and seeing other people who apparently weren't working as hard as he was, living with more financial peace, more breathing room, more freedom. People who seemed to attract money with an ease he couldn't explain. And that comparison, that observation, fed a toxic mix of frustration, envy, and self-doubt inside him that was slowly eating away at his confidence, like rust-corroding metal from the inside where nobody can see it from the outside. And I need to ask you something here that might be uncomfortable, but is absolutely necessary. Have you ever felt that same thing? Have you ever looked at someone who seems to have a peaceful financial life and asked yourself, why not me? Have you ever felt like there's something wrong with you, some kind of invisible block that keeps money from staying in your life? Because if you felt that, pay very close attention to what comes next, because the explanation for this phenomenon is not what most people think. Most people, when they find themselves in this situation, do what Diego did for years. They blame external factors. They blame the low salary. They blame the bad economy. They blame the government. They blame inflation. They blame the lack of opportunities. They blame the boss who doesn't recognize their work. And every time they find someone else to blame, they feel a momentary relief. Because if it's someone else's fault, then they don't need to look inward. They don't need to question themselves. They don't need to face the uncomfortable possibility that maybe, just maybe, the problem is inside them. But that relief is a trap. Because as long as you place the blame out there, the solution stays out there too. And when the solution is out there, you become dependent on things you can't control, dependent on the economy improving, dependent on the boss recognizing you, dependent on the government taking action, dependent on luck showing up. And that dependency is the most subtle and most cruel prison that exists, because you don't even realize you're trapped. You think you're free because you're moving, you're running, you're pushing. But you're moving inside a cage. And the cage isn't made of iron. It's made of beliefs. It's made of thoughts. It's made of unconscious patterns you've been carrying since childhood that determine, without you realizing it, every financial decision you make. Diego lived inside that cage for years, and the moment he began to realize the cage existed was the most painful and at the same time, the most liberating moment of his life. It all started on an ordinary day, a day like any other. Diego was coming home from work, tired, frustrated, thinking about the bills he needed to pay and the money he didn't have to pay all of them. It was one of those days when the exhaustion isn't just physical, it's existential. It's the kind of tiredness that comes from within, that makes you question the meaning of everything, that makes you ask yourself, what am I working so hard for if nothing ever changes? And on that day, by a stroke of chance he still can't explain to this day, he heard a sentence. It might have been on a podcast, it might have been in a conversation, it might have been in a video that played on his phone while he was distracted. He doesn't even remember the exact source. But the sentence that he never forgot. The sentence was simple, direct, almost unremarkable on the surface, but it carried a truth so profound that it shook the entire foundation of what Diego believed about money. The sentence said this: "You don't need to chase money. You need to become someone money looks for." When Diego heard that, something happened inside him. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't a dramatic moment of revelation. It was more like a tremor. A silent tremor that started deep down and spread slowly, like a crack that begins at one point and keeps expanding until it compromises the entire structure. Because that sentence, as simple as it was, questioned everything he had done in recent years. All the effort, all the running, all the desperate search for more money, all of it was based on an assumption he had never questioned, the assumption that he needed to chase money. What if that assumption was wrong? What if the chase itself was the problem? What if the very act of chasing money was exactly what was pushing it away from him? This idea was so counterintuitive, so different from everything he had ever learned, that his first impulse was to reject it. That's nonsense, he thought. Of course I need to chase money. Everyone does. That's how the world works. But the sentence wouldn't leave his head. It stayed there, spinning, like a song that gets stuck and you can't stop humming. And in the days that followed, Diego began to observe something he had never observed before. He started paying attention to the people around him who seemed to have a different relationship with money. People who didn't seem desperate, people who didn't seem to be running, people who had a financial calm he envied. But now, instead of just envying it, he wanted to understand it. And what he started to notice was eye-opening. These people weren't chasing money. They were doing something completely different. They were developing themselves. They were growing as people. They were investing not just in bank accounts, but in themselves. They were building skills, building mindsets, building ways of thinking and acting that naturally attracted financial opportunities. And that observation lit something inside Diego, a curiosity he hadn't felt in a long time, a desire to understand how it worked, a willingness to question everything he had always believed and consider the possibility that there was a different path. And it was from that moment on that his transformation began. And I want to ask you something here that's very important. Have you ever stopped to think about the difference between chasing money and becoming someone who attracts money? It seems like the same thing, but it's not. It's profoundly different. Chasing money is an act of desperation. It's acting from a place of lack. It's moving, driven by the fear of not having. And when you act from fear, from lack, from desperation, the decisions you make are contaminated by those emotions. You accept any job, even if it doesn't value you. You make hasty financial decisions out of fear of missing an opportunity. You spend impulsively when you finally have some money because the feeling of scarcity makes you want to use it before it's gone. You negotiate poorly because the desperation shows and people can sense it. You submit to situations that don't respect you because the need speaks louder than your dignity. And all of that, all those actions born from desperation, creates a cycle that feeds on itself. The more you run, the more tired you get. The more tired you get, the worse your decisions become. The worse your decisions, the less money you have left. The less money, the more desperate you feel. And the more desperate you feel, the harder you run. And the cycle continues, and continues, and continues, until you can't take it anymore. Becoming someone who attracts money, on the other hand, is an act of construction. It's acting from a place of growth, not lack. It's moving driven by evolution, not fear. It's investing in yourself to become someone who naturally creates value, who naturally solves problems, who naturally offers something the world needs and is willing to pay for. And when you operate from that place, everything changes. Your decisions are better because they're not desperate. Your opportunities are better because you're prepared for them. Your relationship with money is healthier because it's not based on fear. It's based on confidence. And the money that once ran away starts to draw closer. Not by magic, not through the law of attraction in some mystical sense, but for a very concrete and very real reason. You've become someone who creates value. And money is attracted to value. It always has been. It always will be. It took Diego a while to fully understand this. It wasn't something that clicked overnight. It was a process, a slow process, sometimes painful, sometimes frustrating, but consistent. And the first thing he did in that process was something most people avoid their entire lives. He looked inward. He stopped analyzing the world out there and started analyzing the world in here. He started asking himself not what the world was doing to him, but what he was doing to himself. And the first discovery he made on this inner journey was about his beliefs. Diego realized he was carrying inside him a set of beliefs about money that he had never consciously chosen. They were beliefs that had been installed in him throughout his life, since childhood, by people he loved and respected, but who had their own financial limitations. He remembered the conversations he overheard at home as a child. He remembered the phrases his father repeated, phrases like, "Money doesn't grow on trees. That's not for people like us. Rich people are all dishonest. Be happy with what you have. Wanting too much is a sin." He remembered how his mother got anxious every time money came up, as if talking about money were something dangerous, something that brought bad luck, something that should be avoided. He remembered how his grandparents lived with the bare minimum and treated any desire to have more as greed, as ingratitude, as the arrogance of someone who doesn't know their place. And those memories, those phrases, those experiences, which at the time seemed harmless, had installed themselves in Diego's unconscious as absolute truths. Without him realizing it, without him choosing it, without him authorizing it, those beliefs had become the software governing his financial behavior. Every decision he made about money passed through that invisible filter. Every opportunity that came along was evaluated by that belief system he didn't even know existed. And the result was always the same: sabotage. Because if deep down, at the deepest level of his mind, he believed that money wasn't for people like him, then every time money started to accumulate in his life, the unconscious would sound an alarm. And that alarm would generate sabotaging behaviors he didn't even realize he was having. He'd spend for no reason. He'd make a bad financial decision. He'd let an opportunity pass. He'd invest in something without researching. He'd lend money to people who would never pay him back. None of that was bad luck. None of it was misfortune. It was his unconscious, working behind the scenes, doing exactly what it was programmed to do: keep him in the place where he believed he belonged. And I need to ask you a very direct question here. What are the beliefs you carry about money? What do you truly believe deep down about your ability to have money, to keep money, to multiply money? Do you believe you deserve it? Do you believe you're capable? Or is there a voice in there, maybe so quiet you can barely hear it, telling you that you weren't made for this? Telling you that people like you don't make it? Telling you that having money is for other people, not for you? Because if that voice exists, and I can assure you that for the vast majority of people it does, then that voice is the first obstacle that needs to be faced. Not the low salary, not the bad economy, not the lack of opportunities, the voice. Because as long as it's active, it will sabotage every external effort you make. Diego faced that voice, and the process wasn't pretty. It wasn't inspiring at first. It was uncomfortable. It was like opening an old wound you thought had healed, but that had actually only been covered with a surface-level bandage. Underneath the bandage, the wound was still there, open, inflamed, hurting. And to truly heal, he had to remove the bandage, clean the wound, feel the pain, and let the real healing process happen, not a fake one. The first thing he did was identify every limiting belief he carried about money. He grabbed a notebook and started writing. He wrote down every phrase he remembered hearing about money as a child. He wrote down every feeling that arose when he thought about having a lot of money. He wrote down every fear that surfaced when he imagined a life of financial abundance, and the list was long, much longer than he expected. He discovered he was carrying dozens of limiting beliefs he had never questioned. Beliefs like, money changes people for the worse. If I have a lot of money, I'll lose my friends. Rich people are cold and insensitive. I'm not smart enough to be wealthy. Nobody in my family has ever had money, so it must be genetic. Each of those beliefs, no matter how absurd it looked written on paper, held enormous power over his behavior. Because beliefs don't need to be rational to be powerful. In fact, the most powerful beliefs are precisely the most irrational ones, because they're the ones that operate beyond the reach of logic, in the dark territory of the unconscious, where reason has no access. And after identifying those beliefs, Diego did something I consider one of the most courageous steps in this entire journey. He questioned every single one of them. He took them one by one and asked himself, is this actually true? Do I have concrete proof that this is true? Or is this just a story someone told me and I accepted without questioning? And when he started questioning, the beliefs started to crumble, because most of them couldn't survive the test of reality. Money changes people for the worse? He knew wealthy people who were generous, kind, ethical. So no, money doesn't automatically change people for the worse. Money amplifies what's already there. If a person is generous, with more money, they're more generous. If a person is petty, with more money, they're more petty. The problem was never money. The problem was always character. Nobody in my family has ever had money, so it must be genetic. He researched and discovered there's no poverty gene. There are family patterns of financial behavior that repeat from generation to generation, not because they're genetic, but because they're learned. And if they're learned, they can be unlearned. They can be replaced. They can be transformed. I'm not smart enough to be rich. He looked around and saw people with far less formal education than him living in abundance. And he saw people with doctoral degrees living in scarcity. Academic intelligence and financial intelligence are completely different things, and financial intelligence can be developed by anyone at any point in life. Belief by belief, Diego dismantled the structure that had been holding up his unhealthy relationship with money. And as the beliefs fell, he started to feel lighter, freer, like he was shedding layers of heavy clothing he'd been carrying for decades without realizing it. And I need to ask you something here that could be a turning point for you. If you could list right now the 3 strongest beliefs you have about money, what would they be? Not the beliefs you think you should have, the real beliefs, the ones that live inside you, the ones that govern your decisions without you realizing it. Think about that, because identifying those beliefs is the first step to breaking free from them, and breaking free from them is the first step to changing your financial reality. But Diego's journey didn't stop at beliefs, because dismantling limiting beliefs is essential, but it's only the foundation. On top of that foundation, something new needs to be built. And what Diego decided to build was a new identity. He understood that the problem wasn't just what he believed about money. The problem was who he believed he was in relation to money. His financial identity was that of someone who fights, who battles, who pushes hard, but who never gets there. It was the identity of the warrior who never wins the war, the runner who never crosses the finish line, the worker who never receives the reward. And that identity, that deep self-definition, was like an internal GPS directing his entire financial life toward the same old destination: scarcity. No matter how many detours he tried to take, the GPS would recalculate the route and bring him right back to the starting point. Because the destination was programmed by the identity. And to change the destination, he needed to reprogram the GPS. And to reprogram the GPS, he needed to change the identity. And here, I need to explain something that psychology teaches us about identity, and it's absolutely fascinating. Identity is not something fixed. It's not something you're born with and die with. Identity is a construction. It's a story you tell yourself about who you are. And like any story, it can be rewritten. You can change the character. You can change the plot. You can change the ending. But to rewrite the story, first you need to recognize that the current story is just one version, not the absolute truth. Diego had lived his entire life believing his story was the truth, that he was, in fact, someone money just wouldn't come to, that this was part of his nature, something unchangeable, something final. But when he understood that identity is a construction, that he himself could reconstruct it, everything changed. He started simply. He stopped defining himself as someone who chases money and started defining himself as someone who is learning to attract money. See the difference? It's not a radical overnight change. It's not saying, I'm a millionaire when you've got $100 in your account, because that would be a lie and the unconscious would immediately reject it. It's a gradual, honest change, rooted in the truth of the moment. He was, in fact, learning, and that truth was enough to start moving the GPS in the right direction. Little by little, as he learned more, practiced more, and the first results started to appear, his identity kept updating. From, I'm learning to attract money, to I'm someone who attracts opportunities. From, I'm someone who attracts opportunities to I'm someone who builds wealth consistently. And each update in identity generated an update in behavior. And each update in behavior generated new results. And new results reinforced the new identity. And the virtuous cycle took hold, replacing the old vicious one. And I want to ask you something here that's very important. If you had to define yourself right now, in a single sentence, who you are in relation to money, What would you say? I'm someone who never has money? I'm someone who's always in a tight spot? I'm someone who works a lot and earns little? Because whatever sentence came to your mind, that is your current financial identity, and that identity is creating the financial reality you're living. If the identity is one of scarcity, the reality will be one of scarcity. If the identity is one of constant struggle, the reality will be one of constant struggle. And the only way to change the reality is to change the identity first. Now, Diego also understood that changing your identity isn't just about repeating nice phrases in the mirror. Yes, affirming the new identity is necessary, but affirming without acting is just an illusion. Identity is cemented through actions, through everyday behaviors, through the small decisions you make at every moment. So he started acting in alignment with the new identity he was building. And the first area he focused on was developing skills. Diego noticed something that sounds obvious when you hear it, but that most people ignore in practice. He realized that the money a person receives is directly proportional to the value they create, not the effort they put in. The value they create. And this distinction between effort and value is crucial. You can put in an enormous amount of effort doing something the world doesn't value, and your financial return will be small. Or you can put in moderate effort doing something the world values greatly, and the return will be large. It's not about how much you sweat. It's about how much value you deliver, and value isn't something abstract. Value is the ability to solve problems, to meet needs, to make people's lives easier, to offer something people want or need and are willing to pay for. And this ability to create value can be developed, can be learned, can be expanded through skill development. Diego looked at himself and asked honestly, "What skills do I have that create value in the world?" And the answer bothered him, because he realized that his skills, while real and legitimate, were limited. They were skills that many other people also had. There was nothing that set him apart, nothing that made him special, unique, indispensable. And in a world where thousands of people offer the same thing you do, the price of what you offer tends to drop. It's the basic law of supply and demand. When supply is high and demand stays the same, the price goes down. And when the price of what you offer goes down, the money you receive goes down with it. So Diego made a decision that would change his financial trajectory. He decided to invest in developing skills that would set him apart, not random skills, strategic skills, skills the world valued and that few people had mastered. He started studying, not just in the formal sense of taking courses and earning diplomas. He studied strategically. He identified which skills were most valued in his field. He researched what competencies successful people in his area had in common, and he started developing them one by one with dedication and consistency. And here I need to ask you a question that might open your eyes. What skills do you have today that set you apart from the thousands of other people who do what you do? What do you offer that's unique, that's hard to find, that people are willing to pay more for? If you can't answer that question clearly, then that's a clear sign that the most urgent investment you need to make isn't a financial one. It's in yourself. Because when you become someone with rare and valuable skills, the market comes looking for you. Opportunities find you. Money comes as a natural consequence of the value you create, and that's radically different from chasing money. That's making money chase you. Diego dove deep into this development process, and it wasn't easy. Studying after a long day of work is exhausting. Developing new skills when you're already drained requires a level of discipline that goes beyond normal. But he was motivated by something he didn't have before, a clear vision of who he wanted to become. Not how much he wanted to earn, who he wanted to become. And that distinction is critical, because when your focus is on how much you want to earn, the motivation is external and fragile. It depends on results. If results don't come quickly, the motivation dies. But when your focus is on who you want to become, the motivation is internal and resilient, because the process of becoming a better person is rewarding in itself, regardless of the immediate financial results. And the financial results, when they come, are a bonus. They're natural consequences of a process that's already worth it on its own. Diego also learned something about how he handled the money he already had, and this lesson was equally transformative. He realized that the way he treated the money he already possessed was a direct reflection of the relationship he had with money in general. And that relationship was, to put it mildly, neglectful. He didn't know exactly how much he earned per month when all income sources were considered. He didn't know exactly how much he spent. He didn't know where the money was going. He didn't have a budget. He didn't have clear financial goals. He didn't have a saving strategy. He didn't have an investment plan. Money flowed in and out of his life with no direction whatsoever, like a river without banks that spreads everywhere without reaching anywhere. And I need to ask you a question that's very revealing. If money were a person, how would it describe the relationship it has with you? Really think about that. If money could talk, what would it say? Would it say it's well treated, respected, valued, cared for? Or would it say it's ignored, wasted, neglected? That it enters your life and is treated carelessly, without attention, without planning, without respect? Because psychology shows us that we attract more of what we respect and push away what we neglect. If you treat the money you already have carelessly, you're sending a message to your unconscious that money isn't important enough to receive attention. And the unconscious responds to that message by generating behaviors that push more money away from your life. It's like a person who wants more friends but treats the friends they already have poorly. New friends aren't going to want to come around if they see how the old ones are being treated. Diego understood this and started changing the way he treated money. He started with the basics. He did a complete assessment of his financial situation. He wrote down every income source. He wrote down every expense. He categorized his spending. He identified where he was spending more than he should. He identified unnecessary expenses that had been piling up month after month without him noticing. And what he discovered in that assessment shocked him. Small daily expenses that seemed insignificant individually were consuming a huge portion of his income when added up. A coffee here, a subscription there, an impulse purchase over there, all of it together represented a significant financial leak that he simply couldn't see because he'd never stopped to look. And I need to ask you something here. Do you know exactly where your money goes every month? If I asked you right now to tell me with precision how much you spent in the last 30 days and on what, could you do it? Because if the answer is no, then you're in the same situation Diego was in. You're letting money slip away without even noticing. And that's not inflation's fault. It's not the low salary's fault. It's a lack of awareness, and awareness is something you can develop at any time. From that assessment, Diego created a system. A simple, practical system he could follow day to day without overcomplicating things. He defined how much he wanted to save per month. He defined how much he wanted to invest. He defined how much he could spend on each expense category. And he automated whatever he could. He set up automatic transfers to savings and investments as soon as his paycheck hit his account before he could spend that money. Because he learned a powerful truth. If money sits available in your checking account, it will get spent. Not out of malice, not out of irresponsibility, but because the human mind tends to spend what it sees as available. It's a psychological pattern. When money is right there, accessible, visible, the temptation to use it is enormous. But when money is directed before it becomes available, the behavior changes automatically. You adapt to what's left, and what was directed stays protected. That simple strategy alone drastically changed Diego's relationship with money. For the first time in his life, he was saving money consistently. For the first time, the balance at the end of the month was positive. For the first time, he felt like he was in control, not the money. But Diego's transformation had yet another layer that I consider perhaps the most important of all. He learned about the difference between reacting and responding to money. And this difference, as he discovered, is what separates those who build wealth from those who destroy it. Most people react to money. When they receive it, they react by spending. When they lose it, they react by panicking. When they see an opportunity, they react with excessive excitement or paralyzing fear. Reacting means acting without thinking. It means letting emotion take the wheel. It means being controlled by the impulse of the moment. Responding, on the other hand, is different. Responding means creating a space between what happens and what you do. It means receiving the information, processing it, evaluating it, and only then deciding. It means putting intelligence in the driver's seat and letting emotion ride shotgun. Emotion can be there, it can be heard, but it shouldn't drive. Diego realized that his entire financial life had been a sequence of reactions, never responses. And each reaction generated consequences that fed the scarcity cycle. To change this, he adopted the 48-hour rule. Every time he felt the urge to buy something that wasn't essential, he waited 48 hours. Every time an investment opportunity came up, he waited 48 hours. Every time an important financial decision needed to be made, he waited 48 hours. Not to procrastinate, to process, to give his intelligence time to evaluate what his emotions wanted to decide on impulse. And the result was extraordinary. Most of the impulse purchases he would have made simply lost their urgency after 48 hours. Most of the opportunities that seemed unmissable turned out to be average after a calmer analysis. Most of the decisions he would have made in the heat of the moment proved to be misguided when viewed with a cooler head. And I want to invite you to try this in your own life. Starting today, when you feel that urgency to spend, that compulsion to buy, that overwhelming desire to make a quick financial decision, stop, breathe, and wait 48 hours, just 48 hours. If after that time the decision still makes sense, go ahead. But I guarantee you that the vast majority of the time, the urgency will have evaporated, and you'll be thankful you didn't act on impulse. Now I want to go deeper into another aspect of Diego's journey that is absolutely crucial and tied to one of the most powerful concepts in financial psychology, the concept of deservingness. Diego carried deep down, in a part of his mind he rarely visited, a feeling that he didn't deserve to have money. Not consciously. Consciously, he said he wanted money, that he deserved a better life, that he worked hard enough to have more. But in a deeper layer, a layer words couldn't reach, there was a silent belief that he wasn't good enough, that people like him, from his background, with his history, weren't meant for prosperity. And this belief of not deserving is, according to psychology, one of the most efficient saboteurs that exists when it comes to money. Because it operates in the dark, it operates in silence, you can't see it, you can't hear it, you can't feel it explicitly, but it's there all the time, influencing every decision, every behavior, every reaction. It's like a virus in your computer's operating system. You can't see the virus. The computer seems to be working normally, but little by little, things start going wrong. Programs crash, files get corrupted, performance drops, and you don't understand why until someone analyzes the system and finds the virus hiding there, causing damage without being detected. The belief of not deserving works exactly the same way in the mind. It hides, it camouflages, it disguises itself. But the damage it does is real and concrete. It makes you accept less than your worth. It makes you not negotiate when you should. It makes you sabotage yourself when you're about to prosper. It makes you feel guilty when you earn money. It makes you feel uncomfortable when you have money in your account. It makes you find unconscious ways to get rid of money before it can accumulate and make real something that, deep down, you believe you don't deserve. And I need to ask you a question that cuts right to the point. If someone offered you, right now, $100,000, no conditions, no tricks, just a genuine gift, what would your immediate internal reaction be? Not the reaction you'd show to others, the reaction inside, the real reaction. Would it be pure joy, or would there be discomfort, a feeling that this isn't for me, a worry about what others would think, a doubt about whether you really deserve it? Because any discomfort, any hesitation, any feeling of inadequacy in the face of abundance is a clear sign that the belief of not deserving is active inside you. And as long as it's active, it will function as an invisible ceiling limiting the amount of money you allow yourself to have. Diego confronted this belief head on, and the process was painful. Because confronting the sense of not deserving means visiting dark places in your own history. It means remembering moments when you were diminished, moments when you were told you weren't good enough, moments when you were made to feel that your place in the world was small and that trying to take up more space was too much audacity. It means recognizing that you internalize those messages and turn them into truths about yourself. And it means, finally, deciding that those messages were wrong, that you do deserve, that you are worthy, that abundance isn't reserved for others. It's for everyone, including you. Diego started working on this belief daily. Every day, first thing in the morning, before any other activity, he looked at himself in the mirror and said out loud, "I deserve financial abundance. I am worthy of prosperity. Money is welcome in my life, and I know how to take care of it." In the beginning, as happens with everyone, he felt ridiculous. He felt like he was lying to himself. He felt like it was silly. But he kept going, day after day, week after week. And little by little, something started to change. The words penetrated deeper and deeper layers of his mind. The belief of not deserving began losing its strength, like a plant that stops being watered and slowly dries up until it dies. And in its place, a new belief was being born, strong, vibrant, alive. The belief that he did deserve, that he was capable, that abundance was his natural state, not the exception. And as this new belief took root, his behavior started changing in ways he didn't even consciously notice. He started positioning himself differently at work. He started charging more for what he did. He started negotiating with more confidence. He started refusing situations that didn't value him. He started accepting opportunities he would have previously rejected because he thought they weren't for him. And those subtle shifts in behavior generated enormous changes in results. Not overnight, gradually, consistently, for real. And it's precisely that gradualness that makes the transformation sustainable. Because drastic, sudden changes rarely last. But gradual changes, built brick by brick, day after day, those create solid foundations that endure. Now I want to talk about another aspect Diego learned that's directly connected to why money runs from certain people. It's the issue of self-worth and its relationship to financial worth. Psychology shows there's a direct correlation between how much a person values themselves and how much they allow themselves to earn. People who have low self-worth tend to accept pay below what they deserve. They tend to charge less for the services they provide. They tend not to negotiate salaries. They tend to settle for less, not because they don't want more, but because deep down they don't believe they're worth more. And the market responds accordingly. When you don't value yourself, others don't value you either. When you charge little, others pay little. When you accept less, others offer less, because the way you treat yourself teaches others how to treat you. Diego had a serious self-worth problem. He was good at what he did. He had experience, he had knowledge, he generated results. But he never charged in accordance with the value he delivered. He always accepted what was offered without questioning it. He always settled for what came his way. He always felt that asking for more would be arrogant, would be wanting too much, would be crossing lines someone like him should respect. And this posture of undervaluing himself was one of the biggest pipes through which the potential money in his life drained away before it ever arrived. He wasn't losing money he already had. He was losing money he never got to have because he didn't allow himself to receive it. When he started working on his self-worth, his relationship with money changed drastically. He started asking himself honestly, how much is what I do really worth? How much is my experience, my dedication, the results I generate really worth? And when he compared it with what he was receiving, the gap was glaring. He was worth far more than he was being paid, but he'd never allowed himself to acknowledge that. And that recognition, that decision to truly value himself, changed his stance. He started charging according to the value he delivered. He started negotiating with more confidence. He started turning down offers that didn't respect his work. And at first, it was scary, very scary. The inner voice saying, "Who do you think you are to charge that much?" was screaming at full volume. But he kept going, and gradually people started paying what he charged. Not all of them. Some walked away. But the ones who stayed paid the fair price. And the ones who came later already knew his work had value. And the financial result of that shift in posture was significant, not because he worked more, because he valued himself more, and the world responded accordingly. And I need to ask you now with complete sincerity, are you charging what you're truly worth for what you do? Are you being compensated in line with the value you deliver? Or are you accepting less out of fear of losing what you have, fear of being judged, fear of seeming arrogant? Because if you're accepting less, you're literally preventing money from entering your life in the amount it should, and that's not the market's fault. It's a consequence of your self-worth. Diego also learned about the importance of financial clarity. Cognitive psychology shows us that the human mind works best when it has clear direction. When you know exactly where you're going, the brain can mobilize resources, spot opportunities, and make decisions with much greater efficiency. But when your financial goals are vague, generic, things like, I want to earn more, or I want a better life, the brain doesn't know what to do with that. More, how much? Better, how? Without specificity, there's no direction, and without direction, there's no real progress. Diego had been living in that vagueness for years. He wanted to improve. He wanted more money. He wanted a different life. But when asked about the details, he couldn't answer. How much exactly? By when? To do what? He had no answers, and without answers, he was going in circles. When he finally sat down and defined with absolute clarity what he wanted, with specific numbers, with set deadlines, with concrete purposes, something shifted in his mind. Vagueness gave way to direction, confusion gave way to clarity, and clarity gave way to focused action. Because when you know exactly how much you want, by when you want it, and why you want it, the mind starts working in your favor. It starts identifying opportunities that previously went unnoticed. It starts filtering information efficiently, separating what's relevant from what's noise. It starts generating creative solutions that once seemed impossible. And I want to invite you to do an exercise right now. Define clearly how much money you want to have. Don't say a lot, say a number. Define by when you want to have that amount. Don't say someday. Say a date. And define what for. Don't say to live better. Say specifically what living better means to you. How much does the lifestyle you want actually cost? What are the real numbers? Because as long as prosperity is an abstract concept in your mind, it will remain abstract in your life. Only when it becomes concrete in your mind can it become concrete in reality. Another fundamental aspect Diego learned was about environment. He discovered that the environment you live in profoundly influences your financial behavior. And when I say environment, I'm not just talking about physical space. I'm talking about the people you spend time with, the conversations you have, the information you consume, the values that circulate around you. There's a famous saying that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And while that's a simplification, the core idea is true. The people around you influence how you think, how you act, how you feel, and how you deal with money. If you're surrounded by people who constantly complain about not having money, who see wealth as something negative, who handle money carelessly and irresponsibly, that scarcity energy is going to contaminate you. It's going to reinforce limiting beliefs. It's going to normalize destructive financial behaviors. It's going to keep you stuck in a pattern of financial mediocrity, even if you consciously want out of it. Diego realized that his environment was deeply toxic from a financial standpoint. Most of the people around him lived with a scarcity mindset. Conversations were dominated by complaints about lack of money, about high prices, about how it was impossible to get ahead. And he participated in those conversations. He agreed. He reinforced them. He fed them, without realizing that every one of those conversations was like watering the seeds of scarcity planted in his unconscious. When he decided to change his environment, he faced resistance. The people around him didn't understand. Some felt offended. Some thought he was acting like he was better than them. But he pressed forward. He started seeking out people who had a healthy relationship with money. He looked for mentors. He joined study groups. He started consuming content that reinforced an abundance mindset instead of a scarcity one. And the change in environment exponentially accelerated his transformation. Because when you're in an environment that supports growth, growing becomes easier. When you're in an environment that sabotages growth, growing requires a superhuman strength that most people can't sustain long term. And I want to ask you something here that might be uncomfortable but necessary. Does your current environment support your financial growth or sabotage it? Do the people you spend the most time with inspire you to grow or pull you down? Do the conversations you take part in reinforce abundance or scarcity? Does the content you consume feed hope or hopelessness? Because if the environment is sabotaging you, changing the environment isn't a luxury. It's a necessity. It's not arrogance. It's survival. And this change can be gradual. You don't need to cut people out of your life abruptly, but you do need to add people and content that reinforce the mindset you want to build. Now I want to share the discovery I consider the deepest of Diego's entire journey. He discovered that money is a consequence of the person you become. It's not a prize for what you do. It's a reflection of who you are. And that distinction changes absolutely everything. When you believe money is a prize for effort, you focus on doing more. Working more hours, running faster, draining yourself further. And as we've already seen, that doesn't work in the long run. But when you understand that money is a reflection of who you are, the focus shifts. You stop trying to do more and start trying to be more. More aware, more skilled, more strategic, more disciplined, more courageous, more clear, more worthy, and as you become more, money responds. Not because there's some mystical force at work, but because a person with more awareness makes better decisions. A person with more skills creates more value. A person who's more strategic spots better opportunities. A person who's more disciplined executes with greater consistency. A person who's more courageous takes calculated risks that yield higher returns. A person with more clarity knows exactly what they want and how to get there. And all of that together creates a superior financial outcome, not by luck, not by privilege, by personal development. Diego understood this and stopped chasing money. He stopped focusing on how much he wanted to earn and started focusing on who he wanted to become. And that shift in focus, that inversion of priorities, was the catalyst that permanently transformed his financial life. Because the effects of this change aren't temporary. When you become a better person, the results of that evolution are permanent. You don't lose the skills you developed. You don't lose the awareness you gained. You don't lose the mindset you built. Those internal victories are yours forever. And they keep generating positive financial results indefinitely. I want to now share another concept Diego learned and that he considers one of the most practical of his entire journey. It's the concept of financial comfort zone. Psychology teaches us that every person has a financial comfort zone, a specific amount they feel comfortable having. It could be $2,000 a month. It could be $5,000. It could be $20,000. The exact number doesn't matter. What matters is that this number works like a thermostat. If you're below it, the unconscious pushes you up. It motivates you to work more, seek more, until you return to the equilibrium point. But if you're above it, the unconscious pulls you back down. It makes you spend more. It makes you make bad decisions. It makes you sabotage opportunities, all to bring you back to the point where you feel comfortable. And the problem is that most people's financial comfort zone is low. It was calibrated in childhood by the family's experiences, by the parents' standard of living. And since then, it has never been updated. It's like walking around with a 10-year-old phone trying to run modern apps. The hardware is obsolete, but nobody did the upgrade. Diego discovered that his financial comfort zone was extremely low. He had grown up in a family where making it to the end of the month with the bills paid was already cause for celebration. And that comfort level had been engraved in him as normal, as the maximum. Every time he tried to go beyond it, the unconscious pulled him back. An unexpected expense popped up, a bad decision was made, an opportunity was lost, not by bad luck, by the unconscious doing its job. To expand that comfort zone, Diego used several strategies. He exposed himself to environments where larger amounts of money circulated, not to spend, but to normalize. So his brain would stop treating bigger sums as something alien and start treating them as something natural. He studied people who had more money, not with envy, with curiosity. He wanted to understand how they thought, how they acted, how they felt about money. He practiced visualization. Every day he dedicated minutes to imagining the life he wanted, with concrete details. The balance in his account, the feeling of calm, the freedom of choice, the peace of not worrying about bills. And neuroscience explains why this works. The The brain doesn't clearly distinguish a vividly imagined experience from a real one. The same brain regions are activated. And with repetition, what was imagination becomes familiar. What's familiar becomes comfortable. What's comfortable becomes possible. What's possible becomes real. Little by little, Diego's financial comfort zone expanded. The invisible ceiling rose. Amounts that once triggered anxiety started to feel normal, and as the zone expanded, money found room to stay and grow. Now I want to recap the most important lessons from this story, because repetition is one of the most effective ways to lock in learning. First lesson: chasing money doesn't work in the long run. The chase drains you, leads you to bad decisions, and keeps you stuck in a scarcity cycle. Instead of chasing, become someone money looks for. Second lesson: the beliefs you carry about money, many of them inherited from childhood, determine your financial behavior. Identifying and replacing limiting beliefs with beliefs of abundance is the most important work you can do for your financial life. Third lesson: your financial identity works like a GPS. It determines where your financial life is heading. Changing the identity is changing the destination. Fourth lesson: the value you create in the world is directly proportional to the money you receive. Investing in developing valuable and rare skills is investing in your ability to attract money. Fifth lesson: the way you treat the money you already have determines how more money will behave toward you. Respecting, organizing, and caring for the money you possess is fundamental to attracting more. Sixth lesson: reacting to money leads to impulsive and destructive decisions. Responding to money with calm and strategy leads to smart decisions. The 48-hour rule is a simple and powerful tool for making this transition. Seventh lesson: the belief of not deserving is a silent saboteur that needs to be identified and replaced. You deserve abundance, and you need to believe that in every layer of your mind, not just on the surface. Eighth lesson: self-worth is directly connected to the financial value you allow yourself to receive. When you value yourself more, the world pays you more. Ninth lesson: financial clarity is fuel for prosperity. Vague goals produce vague results. Specific goals produce specific results. 10th lesson: environment profoundly influences financial behavior. Surround yourself with people and content that reinforce an abundance mindset. 11th lesson: money is a consequence of the person you become. It's not a prize for effort, it's a reflection of your evolution. Focus on becoming more, and money will come as a natural consequence. 12th lesson: the financial comfort zone works like a thermostat that needs to be recalibrated. Expand that zone deliberately to allow more money to enter and stay in your life. These 12 lessons together form the map that guided Diego from a desperate chase to a conscious attraction of abundance. And that map is available to you too, if you're willing to follow it. Now, I want to leave you with some final questions for reflection. Questions that can be the starting point of your own transformation if you have the honesty to answer them truthfully. First question: who do you need to become so that money stops running from you and starts looking for you? Not what you need to do, who you need to become. What version of yourself would naturally attract prosperity? Second question: what beliefs about money are you carrying that aren't yours? What beliefs were planted in your mind by other people that you've never questioned? And most importantly, are you willing to question them now? Third question: what's stopping you from valuing yourself financially? What's keeping you from charging what you're worth, from negotiating with confidence, from refusing what doesn't respect you? Is it fear, insecurity, a belief that wanting more is wrong? Fourth question: if you continued living exactly the way you live today, with the same beliefs, the same habits, the same financial identity, where would you be 5 years from now? The answer to that question should be all the motivation you need to start changing right now. Fifth question: if money weren't a problem in your life, what would your daily life look like? Describe it in detail. Because that description is the treasure map that can guide every decision you make from now on. I want you to take these questions with you. Write down the answers, reflect on them. Come back to them from time to time, because every time you go deeper into these reflections, you're digging further into the layers of your unconscious, finding beliefs that were hidden, unearthing blockages that were buried. And every belief found and replaced is one more step toward abundance. To wrap up, I want to tell you what Diego said when he looked back and saw the path he had traveled. He said the greatest irony of his journey was discovering that money had never been running from him. He was the one, without realizing it, pushing money away, through beliefs, through behaviors, through emotions, through identity, through the way he treated the money he already had, through the way he saw himself, through the way he valued himself. All of that together created a field of financial repulsion that pushed away the very thing he wanted most. And when he stopped pushing, money stopped running. When he changed who he was, money changed its behavior. When he became someone money looks for, money found him, not all at once, not as an instant miracle, but gradually, consistently, authentically, and sustainably. Because true prosperity is not an event, it's a process. It's not something that happens to you, it's something you build. It doesn't depend on luck, it depends on who you decide to become. And that decision, that single decision to stop chasing and start becoming, is the dividing line between a life of scarcity and a life of abundance. I don't know what your financial situation is today. I don't know how much you earn. I don't know how much you owe. I don't know how much you have saved. But I know one thing with absolute certainty. If money seems to be running from you, the answer isn't to run faster. The answer is to stop. Look inward. Find the beliefs that are sabotaging you. Find the identity that's limiting you. Find the behaviors that are pushing money away from you and change all of it. From the inside out. From being to having. From identity to results. Because when you change who you are, money changes its behavior. When you become someone who attracts, money is attracted. When you become someone who knows how to keep it, money stays. When you become someone who knows how to multiply it, money grows. This isn't theory. This is Diego's experience, and it can be your experience too, if you have the courage to start. Now I want to ask you something. If this video made sense to you, if something I said here touched you, if any question made you stop and think, leave a comment down below. Tell me what your biggest financial struggle is today. Tell me if you feel like you're always chasing and never catching up. Tell me what limiting belief you identified in yourself while watching this video. I read every comment and make a point of responding, because that exchange is just as important as the content of the video itself. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, someone who's stuck in that endless chase after money, share this video with that person. A single message at the right moment can change an entire life. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, subscribe and hit the notification bell, because I'm always bringing content like this, content that brings together psychology, behavior, and strategy to help you truly transform your relationship with money. I'll leave it here, but I want to leave you with the sentence that sums up Diego's entire journey, and that I hope will stay imprinted in your mind. You don't need to chase money. You need to become someone money looks for. May that sentence stay with you. May it guide your decisions, and may it be the beginning of a new financial story in your life. A big hug, and I'll see you in the next video.